everyone. I'm Christine. Welcome to the very first episode of Big Little Lessons. We're calling this episode, are you ready? Let's start at the very beginning.
And I'm Jenny, Christine's teaching partner. And today we're going to talk about our educational journeys and why they matter. So let's start at the very beginning, our educational journeys. We might not have all the answers, but we have a lot of experience, over 50 combined years of teaching elementary age students. So where should we start?
Well, at the very beginning, but when you say 50 combined years of experience, I'm like, oh my God. And we actually did the math of how many students we've taught, and it's well over 1,200, right?
Amazing.
So
Amazing.
We'd like to start with a story. So I'm thinking of a story about, related to the topic of the beginning in our educational journey of all the parent-teacher conferences we've had. So more than 1,200 conferences.
Oh, many parents. There's scheduled parent conferences, and there's more parent
So
conferences.
maybe like 5,000.
Yeah. Totally.
And, thinking about parent-teacher conferences, it's the first time parents are hearing about their children in a way that they've never heard about their child before, right? And so it's a little bit of psychological warfare as far as the teacher's concerned, because you have to really sort of feel them out and understand who they are and what they can handle. And so it's an interesting practice. And what we've noticed over the years is that oftentimes it's happened that parents can't separate from their children, and they can't see their children as a separate human than themselves. And so they get really wrapped up in saying, well, when I was in kindergarten.
Yeah, they refer back to when they were that age, not recognizing that their child is in a different school, a different classroom environment, a different generation, right? I've noticed that about moms and daughters. The amount of times that a parent will say, I just can't believe how mean other kids can be. And I'm thinking, well, that's just human nature. And they're 5 and 6 years old, and there are going to be social conflicts. There's going to be academic concerns. But the social dynamic, when their child comes home, had a bad day, had a falling out with their best friend, I've seen a pattern of moms just reliving their own moments of social conflict when they were children, and they can't always separate it.
I actually had that recently, and a little girl was so comfortable in sort of exploring the playground on her own and finding her way and not really wanting to engage with one particular child. And the mom was concerned about, when I was in elementary school, I had a terrible experience. And I said, well, this is not your experience. This is your daughter's experience. It's completely different. So everyone's educational journey is different. And as we've been such longtime kindergarten teachers, it's really the first time children are interacting with adults that are not their caregivers or their parents or their preschool teachers, which is a pretty insular group. And they have to stand on their own 2 feet. And it's a completely different experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. So one of the reasons why we wanted to have this episode is that it's important for our listeners to look at their own educational journeys, because whether you believe it or not, our educational stories, especially the early years, has made an impact on your life. And you can carry those stories without even realizing it. So the more time you can kind of look back on what you've learned, whether it was social or physical, emotional, academic, and understand the good, the bad, the ugly in your own educational, that will help you not project your story onto others or assume things about someone because of previous experience.
Your story be your story. Let your child's story be their story.
Well, and the thing about learning from our educational journey too is creating empathy and to be able to have a better understanding of reading the room. I mean, it's, we're dealing with people. This is very, very beginning in kindergarten.
Yeah, it's so relevant, though.
One of the things I wanted to start with, so asking our listeners to think about your own educational journey. We thought we would take a few moments to share our own educational journey and how it's shaped and formed us. So I'm going to start with you, Christine. Will you share a little bit about your educational background?
Absolutely. So I had what you could say was an unconventional educational journey. At the age of 5, after living in New York, my parents decided to up and move to a completely different country. And not only that, we moved to an island off the coast of Spain, and that was an island called Ibiza. And at the time, it was very, very rural. There were hardly cars on the island. There was no electricity, no running water where we lived. It was a very different experience than growing up, in a New York suburb as I had been. So, and I didn't actually realize this until most recently when I was thinking about my educational journey. And I literally went to a different elementary school every single year of my life. And I don't think it was because it was a small island. And I just think, people were, all the different sort of international people that were living on the island were trying to figure it out. So I didn't go to a Spanish school. I always went to an international school, but it changed often. So that was definitely unconventional. But the year before I moved back to New York, I must have been in 5th grade. I was 11. And I went to this school called the Morna Valley School. And that was such an incredible year for me. And it shaped me beyond anything that I could possibly dream of. The connections that I made with the people there, the teachers, the students, the community. It lives so deeply in my heart. And it really sort of, I think a huge shift for me happened that year, understanding the importance of schooling.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is it. I love this. Let's go.
That's a great positive one.
Yeah, it was. What about you?
Well, mine, it's interesting. As you said this, you've moved schools. I did too. I moved a lot. So my dad was in the Navy, and I was born in Tokyo. We moved to New Orleans when I was 3. I don't remember having any preschool experience. And so my birthday is November 28th. Christine's is November 26th. I made the cutoff for kindergarten by 2 days. I think it was December 1st or something like that. So my mom said, great, let's just get you started at 4.5. So in New Orleans, I went to a public school. I remember being a very large class with one sweet teacher. I felt very lost. I was just in a swarm of students. And then I stayed at that school through 1st grade. Again, it was a very large classroom experience. And I remember nice kids and everything and nice teachers, but I was swallowed up. And then I was switched to a private school, very small classroom, and it had these really small classrooms. And I felt like I could understand everything a little bit better. I was in 2nd and 3rd grade. And then my parents decided, let's switch her back to a public school. It was a big classroom again, and it was fine, although that 4th grade year was quite a year. And then afterwards, we moved to California. And then I went to another school for 5th and 6th, another school for 7th and 8th, and another school for high school. We both did a lot of moving around. Learned a lot from that experience of starting a new room.
Figuring it out.
And learning how to adapt.
I think adaptability definitely came from that, and resilience, whether you like it or not, right?
Yeah.
And throughout that journey, we had all different kinds of teachers. Can you think of a teacher or two who left an impact on you?
Oh, absolutely. I remember, I'm thankful. For the most part, I had really nice teachers. But I would say one of my first, where I just loved a teacher was my 5th grade teacher, Mr. Larson. He was just a gentle soul. He was quiet. He was calm. He loved to do other things besides open your textbook to page whatever. He would help run school plays. He and his wife helped us learn how to macrame. That was a really big thing in the 70s. Macrame in a plant holder. He took us on little field trips. He got into photography, filming, like us acting out certain parts of our history lessons. But it was just that lovely feeling. I felt like I could lean into learning more. Maybe it wasn't my favorite subject, but because he was so warm and kind, he just made me love being there. I think he really got me, probably the first one that I really fell in love with, listening to a book at school. My parents always read to me as a little child, but having him read a chapter book, I just love James and the Giant Peach, it's because of him. And another teacher, very, very different, but wonderful in her own way, was Miss Brannick. She taught high school English. And I had a Bible literature class with her too. High school English, she just always knew how to break everything down and made it so organized. And she, again, was very calm, very relaxed. She made the learning experience warm and inviting. And that was a gift that she had. I learned how to diagram sentences with ease. God bless Miss Brannick. How about you?
Well,
Do you
I
have some
didn't
teachers?
learn that, but I'm sure I was taught it.
Well, you could with her. She knew how to do it.
Gosh, when you say like warm, that's like the first adjective I think of when I think of my first favorite teacher. And I told you that, my journey was unconventional. And so the school, of course, we called our teachers by their first names. And so this teacher's name was Renee. And I'm actually still in touch with her.
What?
Like 100 years later.
Wait, no, where does she live?
She lives in Ibiza still.
Oh,
Yes.
my gosh.
Yes. So she's 22 years older than me because that's how old she was when she was my teacher. At any rate, Renee was also all of those things. And I think at the time in my life, and this is so important because we don't know what our students are dealing with, so maybe they had a rough night or their parents were in an argument or they're getting divorced, like all of those things that create sort of chaos and trauma in their lives. Renee, she was so grounding for me, and she was so nurturing, and I just felt like I could just snuggle up in her arms. She was really, really special. And I also remember some of the things that she taught. But more importantly, it was how I felt.
Yes.
More importantly, it was how I felt. And then in middle school, which, is a hard time to navigate, I was really lucky. Again, we had moved back to New York a few years before that, and I went to a public school. And inside the public school, there was an experimental school called the Lab School. I had this incredible teacher named John Gatto. He since had gone on to win Teacher of the Year award. He's written many books, like an incredible, incredible teacher. But his model was also, kind of reminded me of Mr. Larson, like not conventional. So he was very much, would take us out of the classroom and we'd go on field trips and we would, he came to see us in plays outside of school and he encouraged us to get published. And one of my favorite assignments was he said, okay, everybody has a budget of $25,000, not really, but go to Bloomingdale's and furnish your house. So that kind of thing. It was outside the box.
This is in the 80s?
It was 1980. And he would even say, like, stay home today and I want you to spend the whole day watching commercials and analyzing commercials. But we got so much out of it. He opened our eyes in a way that our eyes hadn't been opened before.
Well, now we'd call that using critical thinking skills, right? When you think back to the late 70s and 80s, it was very much kind of textbook. So to do anything that was kind of hands-on or having kids try something open-ended, that's another big educational term. Right. He was the start of that, at least in my opinion.
He was really a leader in that. Thinking about these teachers, they definitely made an impact. Renee and Mr. Gatto, and I think they really made an impact on who we are today. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm hearing these four teachers and so many. There's so many teachers that have what we would call charisma. They're so warm and they're so engaging. Even though these four teachers we've talked about are so very, very different, they all have that one common denominator of being engaging and charismatic adults.
I love that. I love that word, charisma. And when you meet a child with charisma, you're like, they have charisma, And I wonder if it's something that starts at the beginning or if you can sort of learn. But
we have those students that come in that have that engaging quality. Everybody wants to play with them. They're funny. They're quick-witted, good athlete.
Lighten the situation. They read the room pretty well, right?
Yeah. And then there's others that are learning. And I think we all are always learning how to engage and connect with others. When I think of the word charismatic, what are some of the words that you would use to describe a charismatic?
I would definitely, the word that we used initially, warm,
Yes.
warm gestures, smiles, hugs, one's body language, how that makes you feel. You said both of those teachers that you had were calm, like their energy. I mean, for less their vibe, their positivity.
Yeah, I think also speaking from the heart and not being afraid to say, hey, I'm kind of struggling with this. I'm working on this, or admitting to mistakes. They have a way of presenting themselves, whether it's a formal teaching lesson or just in conversation. You want to hear from them. You want to know a little bit more about them.
Yeah.
It is. Gosh, yes.
And I think like Mr. Gatto, he celebrated our lives, and that's what we do as kindergarten teachers. We always talk about celebrating children and their accomplishments. So that's what a charismatic adult does for people.
Right. Well, they can invite you in. I'm thinking about Mr. Larson. He was starting a play, and I wasn't going to do it. And he had heard that I had sung in a choir at the previous school I'd been in New Orleans. And he came up to me at recess and he said, hey, I understand that you sang in a choir before. I'd love you to try and sing for our play that we're going to have at school. Would you consider it? I wouldn't have done it without his encouragement.
Right.
And there I was. I got casted as, I think, Santa Claus. I had to sing some solo. And I was so nervous, but he's the one who gave me the confidence and the courage to go try.
I love that. I did not know that story about it. I want to just share with our listeners the Maya Angelou quote because I think it's so relevant. I just pulled it up. I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel, right? So we've been so lucky to have these strong, charismatic adults in our life that inspired us, that guided us.
Yeah.
They built our characters on some level.
Right.
And they gave us confidence when at awkward ages when we didn't necessarily have it, right? In certain things.
Oh, middle school. Those are the hardest years. Those are really hard. But when you have those adults, those teachers in your life, you think, how did I get involved with whatever it is that you get involved with? It might have been from a teacher. Well, you hear that all the time. You hear about actors saying, oh, I had this, this acting coach that really impacted my life, or someone who gets involved with computer science because of a special teacher they had in high school.
Totally. Would you say that those particular teachers led you to choosing a path of education?
Absolutely. Because I remember, I guess the word is being seen. I felt seen by these teachers. And when I think about, of course, we've both had a lot of great teachers, but when I think about Mr. Larson and Miss Brannick and how I've taught, it's like I want to be calm and nurturing and kind and present my information as clearly as possible. They inspired me because you have to draw on your own experiences.
You told a story to me a while ago about a teacher. I remember this, a teacher that was not those things.
Oh, gosh.
What was her name?
I don't even know if I want to say her name.
Don't say her name.
I'm not going to say her name because we're our podcast of love. So I will just say she wasn't very nice. Yes, I had her in 4th grade. Now looking back, she's just a very unhappy person and probably dreaded every single day going into the classroom, which is the worst kind of teacher in the world. I was in 4th grade. I know I was not a behavior problem. I was a little spacey. I might be thinking about other things besides the subject that she was teaching. But she ruled with a lot of negativity. She never smiled. She just barked orders all day long. I would try to be charismatic with her, and that did not go over well. I'd try to smile at her. She would frown at me. And I had a whole year of that. And I remember it was the longest 4th grade experience. And so when I think about that, I have forgiven her, of course, but I had to spend some time with it. As when I remember being in the teaching credential program decades ago, and I remember thinking, I know who I want to be and I know who I don't want to be.
Yeah.
And when I have no patience, we as teachers, we have our moments. We have our days that, maybe we're not feeling our best. But I also think that is not who I want to be as a human being, let alone as a person. And in a way, I'm grateful for that not so pleasant experience because it taught me who I don't want to be. It's easy to get harped in on the negative, but I don't want to be that person. So I think sometimes when you have those negative people, whether it's a manager or a neighbor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I mean, that fourth grade teacher came and went, but I've been replaced. She's been replaced by all sorts of people in my life.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So I know who I don't want to be, which is good. Taking a look at your own journey, recognizing who you really loved and who you didn't. I mean, what would you say to the listeners about those charismatic teachers in your life? What have they done for you?
Oh, they filled me up. I mean, they filled me up, and they, when I think of little Christine, the little version of myself, like they were the ones who, really just, they inspired me, they guided me, they made me feel safe, they nurtured me. They listened to me. I felt heard by them. And again, going back to ourselves as teachers, I strive to be those things, to be warm, to be kind, to be joyful, to be innovative. Like John Gatto, he was so innovative. And you and I have tried over the years so many different things, but we've woven those things into our curriculum. So
I agree. And one of the things that I've always loved working with you is taking a moment when maybe we're not feeling 100% and we build each other up and say, give yourself grace, give yourself a breath, and we build each other up so that we can provide our best when we're working with our students.
We're lucky.
And we find that with some laughter too. This too shall pass.
But it's true what you say. We will continue to encounter different kinds of people throughout our lives. To think about, listeners, to really reflect on your journey. Throughout my life, I've heard my parents say, oh, I remember this teacher, I remember that teacher. When you're raising children, you really look at their teacher and you think about who their teachers are, right? How they're helping your child or not helping your child.
As a parent, it helps to look at your own journey so that you're not assuming that your child is having the same experience. It's really important to say, what worked well for me, what didn't work for me, but not projecting your experience on your child. Your child's having a totally different experience.
Completely.
I think about my 2 adult children, my daughters, and their jobs and the different kinds of bosses they've had and their managers. And, they've had the good, the bad, the ugly. But because they've taken some time to kind of reflect on what's worked for them, they can go, okay, yeah, this person. So when you encounter that negative person, it's like maybe they're just an unhappy person. I mean, I always say hurting people hurt people.
So let's do this. Let's offer some gratitude for all the charismatic people that we know, right?
Yes.
But on the other side, let's work on also forgiving folks that perhaps hurt us in any way.
Said then done for all of us.
Let's think about that and working through those so you better understand who you are, right? Yeah. So it helps us. Yeah. And how it shaped you. And also, moving forward, when you encounter people, which we all do in one way or another, you're better equipped to work with them and present the best version of yourself, I think, right?
What we want to do. Good. So with that, Miss Christine, I'm thinking we can wrap it up from here. But listeners, remember, we are a classroom, we are a community, and we're all in this together.
Yes, so tune in next Tuesday for our next episode. And don't forget to subscribe.
All right, until next time.